Good day, everyone. Thanks a lot for taking your time to join us today for this webinar on ensuring GDPR compliance through effective endpoint management. My name is Sneha, and I will be the facilitator for today's webinar. As organizations around the world prepare for major new data privacy rules to take effect, their biggest challenge is taking stock of data and how they use it. The General Data Protection Regulation will bring about a massive overhaul in data privacy rules as it goes into effect on May 25, 2018. From strengthening data processing to improving data security, endpoint management will play a crucial role in getting your organization GDPR ready. For IT departments, this regulation means they must review their handling of employees and customers' information to ensure it meets new security requirements. In this webinar, you will learn how endpoint management products will play an important role in helping IT get ready for GDPR with features such as remote wipe, containerization, application blacklisting, alerts for non-compliance, encryption, and more. It will be great to have your active participation throughout this webinar. So if you have any questions, please use the chat box in your GoToWebinar panel. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If we don't have time to take all your queries, we will email you the answers within 2 working days. We will also email you the recording of this webinar and the presentation slides within 3 working days. At the end of the webinar, a feedback questionnaire will pop up on your screen. It will be great if you can provide your response and help us improve in the future. I would now like to ask our speaker for today's webinar, Nirmit Glennon, to take us through this very interesting presentation.
Thank you, Sneha. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out to join us today. Now, without any further ado, let's take a quick look at the agenda for today. We will start off by understanding the GDPR, focusing on how it came into being, what it constitutes, and how it brings about a renewed focus on end-user data privacy. After this, we will focus on what GDPR compliance means for your enterprise and the steps you need to take towards achieving it. This includes the adoption of an endpoint management solution. Next up, we will discuss the impact of GDPR on endpoint management. And in the final segment, we will showcase our GDPR-ready unified endpoint management solution that will help you secure your organization's desktops and mobile devices. Let's move on to the first segment of the webinar now, which focuses on understanding GDPR. The General Data Protection Regulation, or the GDPR as it is more widely referred to, is not the first of its kind. Its predecessor was the Data Protection Directive. It was a set of principles aimed at ensuring data privacy and security, and this was adopted by the European Union in 1995. So why then, you might ask, was the GDPR needed? Why was there a need for the directives to change? Well, the directives were framed way back in 1995. This was nearly more than 2 decades ago, and technology has advanced rapidly since then. To put things into perspective, Google didn't exist back then. Smartphones and the mobile apps that run on them weren't around. Even the way we use technology has changed rapidly. Just think about the amount of online transactions that happen on a daily basis today. Also, on the flip side, look at the increase in the number of data breaches and cybersecurity related events in the past few years. Simply put, technology had outpaced the directives. This meant that there was a need to improve upon the data security and privacy laws while taking into consideration the latest advances in technology. Also, as this was just a directive and not a regulation, every member state of the European Union interpreted it and implemented it differently. This meant that there was a need to harmonize data privacy laws across the European Union. And of course, the territorial scope of the directive was restricted to the EU itself. which resulted again in a need to increase the territorial scope of the data privacy laws. These, along with a few other factors, prompted a relook at the data privacy laws and ushered in the GDPR. To better understand the GDPR, we first need to understand the rules that are relevant to it. You have the data controllers, the data processors, and the data subjects. A data controller is an entity that decides the purpose and means of processing the personal data of individuals. A processor is a third party that processes personal data on behalf of the controller. And a data subject is the individual whose data is being processed. Next, we need to understand as to whom the GDPR applies to. GDPR applies to all the organizations in the European Union and also to organizations that process the personal data of data subjects in the European Union. There are, of course, a few exceptions as far as what type of processing comes under GDPR. I'm not going to dwell into the granular details of it. Instead, you can read more on it by accessing the link given below. Now that we've understood the rules and the territorial scope, what exactly constitutes GDPR? GDPR revolves around one thing and one thing only, and that is the personal data of individuals. Personal data, as defined by GDPR, is any information that relates to an identified or identifiable natural person. This includes an identification number, location data, an online identifier, or one or more factors specific to the physical, physiological, genetic, mental, economic, cultural, or social identity of that natural person. With personal data, GDPR mandates two things. First, it mandates data security by framing principles which govern the handling of personal data by controllers and processors. Apart from just security, GDPR also mandates data privacy by charting down rights that offer individuals more control over their personal data. And now, to ensure that both principles and rights are upheld, starting May 25, 2018, stringent non-compliance penalties of up to 20 million euros or 4% of the global turnover, whichever is higher, can be levied upon organizations. So this was essentially GDPR in a nutshell. Now let's have a closer look at some of the GDPR principles and understand what they convey. Organizations should ensure processing of data is done in a lawful, fair, and transparent manner. They need to inform data subjects of the kind of processing that will be performed on their personal data. Processing should be done within the scope of consent. Data should be collected and processed for specific purposes that have already been communicated to the data subject. If in case further processing is required, then consent should be obtained from the data subject again. Organizations should collect data which is essential for processing only. No additional information should be sought from the data subjects. Data collected from the data subjects should be accurate and kept up to date at all times. Any outdated data should be deleted immediately. Organizations should erase data once the purpose for processing is completed. Organizations should also employ appropriate security measures to prevent unlawful and unauthorized processing as well as accidental loss of data. Finally, organizations should be able to demonstrate GDPR compliance and they will be held accountable. So these were all the GDPR principles available. Now let's look at some of the rights of the data subjects as defined by GDPR. Data subjects have the right to ask for a copy of all information pertaining to their personal data that is collected, stored, and processed. They also need to be informed of the storage time period and also whether the data has been exposed to other entities. Data subjects can choose to rectify any incorrect personal data at any given point. They can choose to have their personal data erased. They can also choose to restrict the processing of their personal data at any point for specific purposes. They can choose to have the data transferred from one controller to another. Once the data is transferred, the previous controller should erase all data pertaining to the data subject. Also, as far as this right is concerned, the data subjects need to be informed if there are any changes to the agreed upon terms of processing for their personal data. They have the right to withdraw consent at any given point. And also, if the data subjects feel that their personal data is being profiled for other marketing activities, they have the right to demand that the organization stop processing their personal data. So apart from just the principles and rights, GDPR also defines the roles of the controllers. If in case you are a controller, you should be able to demonstrate compliance and will be held accountable. You should adopt data protection by design and by default. What this means is that you should just use or rather collect and process that data which is absolutely necessary. And also, you should be able to secure the data throughout the entire data lifecycle. If you're not based in the European Union, you should appoint a representative. If you're using any third-party processors, then you need to ensure that they too are compliant with GDPR. You need to maintain a record of all processing activities as well. Apart from this, you also need to ensure security by adopting appropriate technical and organizational measures such as pseudonymization and encryption of personal data, ensuring availability of services in case of a technical incident, and regular assessments to test the effectiveness of the security measures. In case of a data breach, you need to inform the supervising authority within 72 hours. Also, you need to inform the data subject in case the breach severity is high. You need to conduct a privacy impact assessment, especially when you're planning to implement new technologies to process data. And finally, you need to appoint a data protection officer if required. You can view the conditions under which it is essential to have a data protection officer by accessing the link given below. This brings us to the end of our first segment, where we have now gained an overview about GDPR. Let's now move on to the next segment, which is on what GDPR compliance means for your enterprise. In this segment, we will shed some light on some of the steps that you need to take in order to achieve compliance with GDPR. First things first, you need to take stock of the current situation. So start off by asking yourself a couple of questions. Is your organization in the European Union? Are you processing the personal data of the European citizens? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then GDPR applies to you. Of course, as explained earlier, there are a few exceptions when it comes to what kind of processing falls under GDPR. You can view that information by accessing the link given below. Next, you need to know who your data subjects are. Whether they are customers, employees, third-party contractors, interns, or whether they are guests. Sorry, I seem to have missed a slide over here. Also, if you're not part of the European Union, then you need to appoint a representative who is based in the Union itself. Once you figure out who your data subjects are, you then need to figure out the data in your organization. You need to know the type of data, whether it is a personal data of individuals, how sensitive the data is, such as whether it is a medical or criminal records. Also, you need to know how long the data has been stored in your database and also how long it is going to be continued to be stored. Next, you need to check whether you have obtained consent for this data. And also, check to see whether the personal data that has been collected is accurate and up to date. If in case there is any outdated information, then you need to delete that data immediately. Next, you need to conduct risk assessments to check for liability, and as part of your assessments, include your existing systems systems for processing and your third-party data processors as well. Once you are done taking stock of the current situation in your organization, you now need to chart out your compliance work plan. You can do that by starting off with identifying and managing the data workflows in your organization. First, you need to identify how and from where is your inbound data coming from. Check to see whether you're taking in only information which is absolutely necessary for the processing. Have filters to check on the inbound data flow and also ensure secure network channel for the data to stream in. Once the data is in your organization, you need to ensure that only authorized personnel get access to this particular data. Also, if it is personal data, you need to ensure that the data is kept updated at all times. Apart from this, you also need to ensure protection to the data by applying appropriate security measures like having the data encrypted and adopting pseudonymization. As you did in the case of the inbound data, you need to identify how the data leaves your organization. Once you've done that, you need to block any and all unauthorized transfer of data. And in case of any authorized data transfer, ensure that it happens through a secure channel. Once the data has left your organization, after the purpose for its processing is done, you need to ensure that it is deleted immediately. If in case you're using any new technology to process data, you need to conduct a data protection risk assessment. Next, you need to have a mechanism in place to respond to user requests. Now, when I say user requests, I mean the rights of the data subjects, such as the right to access personal data, the right to rectify personal data, and the like that were discussed earlier in this webinar. You need to be in a position to respond to these requests within 1 month and at no charge. Apart from this, you also need to have a mechanism for notification in case of a data breach. As discussed earlier, the supervising authority needs to be informed within 72 hours. And if the severity of the breach is high, the data subjects should also be informed. Finally, you need to maintain a record of all the processing activities that have been carried out in your organization. So these are all some of the steps that you can take on your road towards achieving GDPR compliance. This now brings us to the next segment, which is on the GDPR's impact on endpoint management. Endpoint management is the ability to manage devices, provision policies, deploy software and updates, and troubleshoot these devices. Now, with GDPR coming into the picture, endpoint management solutions have also been forced to review their feature offerings to secure the data throughout the entire data life cycles. Let's first consider the inbound data. Data can come into your organization either through your browser, mail client, drive software, or USB. Endpoint solutions should be able to regulate the flow of inbound data through all of these channels. In case of browsers, an EMS solution, or rather an endpoint management solution, should ensure that any data that is downloaded is stored only in a particular file folder which has restrictions applied to it. In case of a mail client like Outlook, the solution should be able to restrict the flow of mails to within your domain. Mails to other domains can be sent based on the role of the employee. In case of USB, the solution should have the option to apply policies that restrict data transfer through USB. Now, once the data comes into the organization, the endpoint management solution should empower you to detect and manage user access. It should be able to enforce login authentication in order to prevent unauthorized access. It should disable guest accounts. It should be able to ensure role-based access to data to ensure confidentiality. In case of a BIOT environment, where the user is allowed to use his personal device for corporate purposes as well, both the corporate and personal workspace will be on the same device. An endpoint management solution should be able to enforce containerization in order to ensure the segregation of the personal and corporate workspace. By doing this, the organization will have access to only the corporate workspace on the device and will no longer, or rather will not be able to access the personal workspace of the end user. The solution should also allow periodic scanning of endpoints to ensure data accuracy. Apart from this, the solution, as mentioned earlier, should have a provision to maintain a record of all processing activities that have taken place. Furthermore, the solution should also offer these data protection features. It should be able to enforce encryption on devices to secure the data on it. It should be able to manage access to files and folders, giving access only to authorized personnel. And if in case there are malicious apps, then the solution should be able to blacklist it and remove them. It should also have the ability to manage firewalls to improve data security. And finally, it should be able to restrict unauthorized devices from accessing business services. Now let's consider the case of outbound data. Here, the endpoint management solution should empower you to restrict unauthorized data transfer by applying Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, AirDrop, and USB restriction policies on devices. While enterprise mobility offers you a lot of benefits, it also has huge risks associated with it. In case one of your corporate devices gets misplaced, lost, or stolen, then the sensitive data on it is at huge risk, and this, of course, will lead to non-compliance. So, the solution should allow you to wipe the sensitive information from the device. If in case the employees are using their own device for business purposes, then you need to be able to block the sharing of data between managed and unmanaged apps. Cloud data backup should also be restricted. The solution should also secure, or rather securely distribute, sensitive documents while routing network communication through secure proxy and VPN channels. Also, you should be able to deploy certificates to devices in order to thwart man-in-the-middle attacks. Apart from all of this, endpoint management solutions should also be able to assist you in data protection impact assessment. Your solution should be able to report any missing patches and updates. It should be able to detect blacklisted apps. It should be able to check whether the device is compliant with security policy. And in case one of the devices has gone missing and hasn't contacted the server over a period of time, you should be notified of the same. Finally, as far as data retirement is concerned, once a device is removed from under management, the data associated with it should also be deleted. So this is how the GDPR impacts endpoint management, and these are some of the features that are currently needed in an endpoint management solution. This brings us to our final segment. Here, we will show a brief demo of a unified endpoint management solution, ManageEngine Desktop Central, which will help you secure your desktops, laptops, and mobile devices. In case of desktops, it supports Windows, Mac, and Linux operating systems. And in case of mobile devices, it supports iOS, Android, and Windows operating systems. Just a small reminder, if in case you have any queries, feel free to post them on chat. So here is the Desktop Central Products UI. Before I start explaining to you the features of Desktop Central, let me give you a brief tour of the product console. We are currently in the Home tab. Now this will give you a summary of the devices and software in the IT organization. As you can see, you get a list of all the computers based on the operating systems. You get a list of configurations that have been applied to all your systems. You get a list, or rather a summary, of all the softwares in your IT environment, the patches that are yet to be applied on the basis of severity, and you can also get details of the vulnerable systems in your IT environment. Scroll down a little more, and here, as you can see, you get a summary of all the different types of mobile devices in your organization, such as smartphones, tablets, laptops, desktops, and others. Apart from this, you can also view the ownership type of these devices, whether they are devices owned by your organization or whether they are owned by your employees. Now, move over to the Configurations tab, and here you can configure your systems based on their operating systems. So you have the following configurations for Windows, Mac, and Linux systems. And as you can see, you can manage file and folder permissions, you can manage your firewalls, you can manage USBs in your IT environment, you can manage the security policies, you can whitelist Wi-Fi's to which your devices need to connect to. You also have user management configurations. Now move over to the Patch Management tab. And here you can scan systems for missing patches, install and uninstall patches based on the operating systems. You can automate patch deployment, and you can also get reports regarding the vulnerable patches and systems. So this is where you'll be getting all the reports. Now under the Software Deployment tab, you can manage all the software that are currently available in your IT environment. Click on the Inventory tab and you get an overview of all the assets, that is your computers and softwares in your IT environment. Over here, you can prohibit certain softwares, and you also have the option to block executables as well. Apart from this, you can also choose from one of the predefined reports that are available based on the hardware, software, license, system, warranty, and security types. Or you also have the option to customize your own report. Next, we move on to the Mobile Device Management tab. This, as its name suggests, is where you will be able to manage and gain complete visibility into the mobile devices in your IT environment. Under the Dashboard tab, here you will get a brief summary of all the mobile devices in your organization based on the platform type, the ownership type, the device type, and apart from this, you also get a summary of all the mobile apps currently available. Now click on the Device Management tab, and over here you will have features such as configuring your corporate profiles, application management, content management, and conditional exchange access. Select the Inventory tab, and here you can explore features such as geo-tracking, remote control, and corporate and complete data wipe in case one of your devices is misplaced or lost. Under Enrollment, you have all the different types of enrollment methods available across the different OS platforms, as can be seen over here. Click on the Reports tab, and here you will have a set of predefined reports based on the application, hardware, enrollment, and security. Apart from this, you also have the option of customizing your own reports. Now click on the Audit tab, and here you will have a record of all the processing activities that have taken place on the server. So now in this section, I will be highlighting a few features in relation to GDPR and will be giving you a brief overview of all of these features. Now first things first, it's important for you to ensure that all the latest patches have been updated on all your systems in the IT environment in order to avoid any kind of attacks such as malware, ransomware, etc. Now in the Product console, click on the Patch Management tab. Scroll down, and on the menu at the left of your screen, click on the Update Now button. This will ensure that the product contacts our servers to download all the latest patches. Next, scroll up and click on the Scan Systems option. Now this will ensure that the Desktop Central server scans all the computer systems in your IT environment to get the latest information pertaining to them. Once you've done that, click on the All Patches option. Now as you can see, you get a list of all the available patches, the installed patches, and also the missing patches in your IT environment. Click on Install or Uninstall Patches, select the OS type, and over here configure the following settings and you can choose to deploy patches. As you can see, you can configure the deployment settings. You can also choose to which domains you need to apply this particular configuration. You can enable notification. Essentially, enabling this option will automatically send notifications via email based on the specified frequency. So now you can click on deploy immediately. Apart from this, you also have the option to automate patch deployment. So all you need to do is click on the schedule task option, select the OS, select the deployment type, click on the configure scheduler option. Now you can select the frequency at which this particular patch deployment should be automated. Once you've done that, click on schedule and click create. You also have the option to decline patches to selected groups and domains in your organization. To do that, as I've just shown, click on the decline patches option, select the option select group and decline patches, click the patch that you want to, or rather the group to which you want to decline patches. First you need to select the group as well. Once you selected the group and selected the patch that you want to decline, click on save. Next, move over to the configurations tab. Now click on the configuration option and select the OS type. For this example, I'll be choosing Windows. As you can see, you have the option to manage the files and folders in your IT environment. To do that, click on the file folder operation and click on computer. Now give a meaningful name for this configuration. Next, you need to configure all of these settings over here. Once you're done configuring the settings, choose the domains to which you want to apply this particular configuration. You can enable notification, provide the email ID of the person who needs to be notified, and click on deploy. Now go back. Apart from managing files and folders, you can also manage firewalls. Click on the firewall option. As always, give a meaningful name to this particular configuration. So you have the ability to configure firewalls for Vista and above or for Windows XP. Once you've configured the settings, as always, select the domains to which you want to apply this particular configuration. You can click on enable notification, provide the email ID, and click on deploy. Go back to configurations, and here you have the option to manage the USBs. To do that, click on secure USB. Give a meaningful name to this configuration as always. As you can see, these are all the devices that you can block or unblock in your IT environment. So I'll be blocking the mouse and USB devices. You can choose to which, or rather you can choose the domain to which this particular configuration needs to be applied. Enable the notification, provide your email ID, and click on deploy. Similarly, you can manage all the users in your organization by clicking on the user management configuration, provide a meaningful name as always, fill in the user details, and here as you can see, you can configure the advanced settings for password as well. Once you're done with this, as always, choose a domain to which you want to apply this configuration. Click on enable notification, provide your email ID, and click on deploy. Go back to configurations. And here, as you can see, you also have the option to whitelist certain Wi-Fi to which the devices in your IT environment needs to connect to. To do that, click on the Wi-Fi option. Configure your Wi-Fi over here. So you can add your Wi-Fi details over here. Now choose the group to which you want, or rather the domain to which you want to apply this particular configuration to. You can click on Enable Notification, enter the email ID, and click on Deploy. Now move over to the Inventory tab. As you can see, you get a brief overview of all the software in your IT environment and also the computers based on the OS type. If in case you want to prohibit certain software, move over to the left-hand menu and click on the Prohibit Software option. Over here, as you can see, this is a list of all the software that has been currently prohibited. If in case you want to add another software that needs to be prohibited, click on the Add option over here. So select the software and click on Update. Now once you prohibited the software, you can also choose what happens to it. To do that, click on the Auto Uninstall policy and enable the automatic uninstallation option. This ensures that the particular software gets uninstalled from the end user's device. Now click on Save. You also have the option to block certain executables. To do that, click on Block Executable option. Now this is where you'll be blocking certain .exe files. Click on the Add Policy option. Select the group. Click on Add Executable. Configure these information over here and click on Add. Now move over to the Admin tab. And under Audit, click on Action Log Viewer. Here, you will get a record of all the processing activities that have been carried out. Next, move over to the Mobile Device Management tab. Now, the first thing you need to do is to add your mobile devices to your Desktop Central server. To do that, click on the Enrollment option on the left-hand menu. Now, as an admin, you can choose to either add these devices through automated methods. Like in the case of iOS devices, you have Apple DEP and the Apple Configurator method. In case of Android devices, you have the QR code enrollment option, the Knox mobile enrollment option, and the NFC enrollment option. And in case of Windows devices, you have the Windows 10 enrollment option. Now, apart from this, if you have a BYOD environment in your organization, then the admins can send out enrollment invitation to the end users, and the end users can accept the invitation, authenticate themselves using either a one-time passcode or their Active Directory credentials. Upon successful authentication, the device gets enrolled with Desktop Central. Now let's see how you can send out an enrollment invite. To do that, click on the Enroll Device option, select the OS type of the mobile device. Here, as you can see, click on the option through User Invites. If in case the user is part of your Active Directory environment, click on the Domain User option. However, if the user is not part of your Active Directory environment, say they are a contract employee, click on the option Local User, enter the username and email ID, select the ownership type of the device, whether it is a personal device owned by the end user or whether it is a corporate device. You can also choose to assign these devices to groups that you have already created. You also have the option to configure the enrollment mail template. Once you're done with all of this information, click on Send Enrollment Invite. Now the user would be receiving an email invitation from Desktop Central. The admin also has the option to send out enrollment invites in bulk. To do that, click on the Bulk Enrollment option. And over here, you need to upload a CSV file with the following information, such as the username, domain name, email ID, the ownership type of the device, the group name, and the platform type. So once you've uploaded the file over here, click on Import. Now all the users mentioned in the CSV file would get separate individual email invitations from the Desktop Central product. You also have the option of self-enrollment. For this to work, you need to have Active Directory configured in your IT environment. Once you've configured the self-enrollment settings, here is a self-enrollment URL which needs to be made available to the end users through a self-service portal of your organization. The end users can access this link and authenticate themselves using their Active Directory credentials. Upon successful authentication, the device will get enrolled with the Desktop Central server. Now, in case of Android devices, upon successful enrollment, a container is created wherein your personal, or rather the end user's personal workspace and corporate workspace are separated. However, in case of iOS devices, iOS does not permit the creation of such a container. But with the help of Desktop Central and some of the policies it supports, creation of an iOS container is possible. To do that, move over to the left-hand menu and click on the Management tab. Now select the Profiles option. Click on the Create Profile option, and for this example, let's choose to create an iOS profile. Give a meaningful name for this profile and click on Continue. As you can see on your left over here, these are all the profiles or corporate configurations supported by Desktop Central. Now, since we wanted to create a container on iOS devices, click on the restriction options, and under device functionality, the first thing that you need to restrict is camera and screenshots and screen recording, as this is the easiest way in which data can be transferred from one device to another. You can also restrict AirDrop over here. Move over to the Security tab, and here you can choose to restrict the sharing of data from managed apps to unmanaged apps. You can also restrict the sharing of data from managed or rather unmanaged apps to managed apps. Click on Network and Roaming, and here you can restrict Bluetooth, and you can also ensure that certain Wi-Fis that have already been whitelisted by your organization are the only Wi-Fis to which the devices can connect to. Apart from this, you also have your passcode policy, wherein you can choose whether the devices can have an alphanumeric value. You can choose the minimum passcode length, the maximum passcode age, and so on. If in case at any point you have any doubts regarding any of the settings over here, all you need to do is click on the help option given over here. This will open up a help document that will have a brief description of all of the profile settings. Now, if in case you want to whitelist a particular Wi-Fi, click on the Wi-Fi option, enter your Wi-Fi details over here, and click on Save. Next, if in case you want to set up a VPN, click on the VPN option, configure your VPN information over here. Now, in addition to this, you also have something called as Configure VPN on Demand. So click on Yes over here. So what this does is that it allows you to establish VPN connectivity automatically without user intervention. So once you specify certain corporate domains, every single time the user tries to connect to this particular domain, a VPN connectivity is established automatically. So once you've configured this information, click on Save. Now move over to Web Content Filter. So here you can ensure to either whitelist or blacklist certain URLs in your organization. Now, if in case you want to blacklist URLs, click on the blacklist option, enter the URLs that you want to blacklist, and click on Save. Now, if in case you want to route all network communication through a secure proxy, click on the Global HTTP proxy option, configure the proxy details, and as always, click on Save. Apart from this, you also have an option wherein you can secure your devices using certificates. To do that, click on the certificate option over here, upload a certificate, and click on Save. So what happens is that once this profile is associated with a particular device or devices in your organization, all of these devices will be secured using just this particular certificate. However, if in case you want to secure every single device with a unique certificate, click on the SEEP option over here, and configure the server details. Once this is done, click on Save. Now, as you can see, you have all of these different profiles which you can configure. So once you've configured all of this information, you can save and publish this profile. The next step is to apply the profile to any number of devices in your IT organization. However, it is recommended that before you apply profiles to all the devices in your organization, you need to test it out on a single device. If in case you're satisfied with the device functionality, then you can go ahead and apply it to all the devices in your organization. To apply profiles to devices, click on the Groups and Devices option. Select Devices. Click on Device. Next, select the Action tab and click on the Associate Profile option. As you can see, any profile that you've created will appear over here. All you need to do is click on the particular profile and choose the Select option. Now, if in case you want to distribute certain sensitive business documents to your end users' devices securely, you can do that by clicking on the Content Management option given over here. First, you need to add documents to your content repository. To do that, click on the Add button over here. Now you can either click over here or drag and drop your documents. Now here's a list of all the supported file formats. You also need to ensure that the maximum file size does not exceed more than 50 MB. Once this is done, click on the document that you want to distribute and select Share. You can either distribute it to specific groups or specific devices. Now, if I want to distribute this document to this particular device, all I have to do is click on the device and choose the Select option. And see, the document is successfully distributed. Now move over to the Inventory tab and click on the Apps option over here. This will give you a list of all the apps that are currently present in your IT environment. If in case you want to blacklist certain apps, all you have to do is click on the apps and select the Mark as Blacklist option. You also have the option to choose what happens to these apps once they are blacklisted. To do that, click on Settings and configure all of the information required over here. See, as you can see, in case of Safe and Knox devices, you also have the option to disable or uninstall the app. Once you've configured all of this information, click on Save. So go back to Devices. Now, select any particular device in your organization. As you can see, you get all the information pertaining to that particular device, such as the OS type and the network summary as well. You can get even more granular information regarding the device, the network, and the SIM information as well. You also get information regarding the apps that have been associated with it, the certificates that have been distributed to it, and also the restrictions. These are the corporate restrictions that have been applied to, or rather that have been applied to this particular device. Now say some of this information has changed, say some of the restrictions has either been updated or some of these restrictions have been downgraded. Now you need to get updated information about all of these devices. To do that, click on the Scan Devices option. Select all the devices that you want to scan and click on the Scan option. Now it is not necessary that you have to manually scan all the devices every single time. Instead, you can choose to automate this as well. To do that, click on the Schedule Device Scan option. Select the Enable Schedule option over here, and you can choose the frequency at which the devices in your IT environment need to be scanned. Once you're done with all of this, click on Save Changes option. Now go back to Devices. Now since these are mobile devices, there is a high chance of one of these devices being misplaced or lost. Once this happens, the sensitive information on this device is at huge risk. So now let's assume that this device belonging to Andrew has been misplaced. Now to secure the data, or rather the sensitive business data on it, select the device, move over to the Action tab over here. Now, if in case this is a device that is owned by your end user, then you can choose the corporate wipe option. What this does is that it completely erases all the business information present on the device. And if in case this is a device owned by your organization, you can choose the complete wipe option. This will ensure that the device settings are completely erased and the device is factory reset. Apart from that, you also have the option to remote lock the device, clear passcode, and reset the passcode. Now move over to the Reports tab. Let's go back to the Mobile Device Management tab, and on your left menu, click on the Reports option. Now here you have a set of predefined reports based on application, hardware, enrollment, and security. Now all of these reports will come in handy, especially as we discussed in the case of data protection impact assessment. Here you can get all the devices with blacklisted apps on them, and you also get a list of all the devices that haven't contacted your server over a particular period of time. Apart from this, you also get reports regarding jailbroken and rooted devices in your organization. Now finally, move over to the Audit tab, and here you get a record of all the processing activities that have been carried out on your mobile devices. So these were some of the features that are available in Desktop Central. If in case you need a more extensive demo of the product, you can always write back to us. We also have monthly Desktop Central trainings, which you can be part of.
Thank you, Nirmit, for that interesting demo. Before we commence with the Q&A session, let me put in a disclaimer that fully complying with the GDPR requires a variety of solutions, processes, people, and technologies. As mentioned during the presentation, endpoint management serves as the foundation for complying with the GDPR. Together with other appropriate solutions, processes, and people, endpoint management not only helps reinforce your IT security, but also prevent data breaches. This webinar is being broadcasted for informational purpose only and should not be considered as legal advice for GDPR compliance. So moving on, the first question that we have is, how does ManageEngine help in data protection? What are the options available?
As explained earlier, we have the Desktop Central product, which helps securing your desktops and mobile devices. And if in case you want to secure just your mobile devices, you can make use of the Mobile Device Manager Plus product.
Thank you, Nirmit. Are there any post-data breach mitigations available?
Yes, we do have certain solutions for that. We have an SIEM solution from our Active Directory suite of products. It's called Log 360. This is something that will be very useful in the current situation, especially.
Are the ManageEngine products GDPR compliant?
The ManageEngine products are still in the process of being GDPR compliant. We expect to be fully compliant by the end of February.
Thank you, Nirmit. You can still send in your questions using the chat options on your GoToWebinar panel. We would be online for the next 15 minutes from now. And that brings us to the end of this webinar. We hope you found the information valuable. Just give us 3 working days and we will email you the recording of this webinar and the presentation slides. For more information on ManageEngine, you can visit www.manageengine.com. Thank you once again and have a great day.